언제부터였는지 텅 빈 맘 너는 알까 혼자 남겨진 이 기분 설명하려 할수록 답답해져 난 자꾸 보이는 내게로 닿고 싶을 뿐 기다리면 와줄까 했던 내 소원을 태워 달려가는 내 맘 알까 잠깐만 날 바라봐줘 널 따라가고 있어 난 온 힘을 다해 비출게 잠깐만 날 지켜봐줘 우리 사이 변하지 않게 거기 그대로 with me I will keep your night 금방 괜찮아질 거라는 한 말로 내겐 위로가 되지 않는 것 같아 파랗게 타올라 꺼져가는 all night 아니라고 할수록 희미해져가 자꾸 맴도는 내게로 닿고 싶을 뿐 기다리면 와줄까 했던 내 소원을 태워 달려가는 내 맘 알까 잠깐만 날 바라봐줘 널 따라가고 있어 난 온 힘을 다해 비출게 잠깐만 날 지켜봐줘 우리 사이 변하지 않게 거기 그대로 with me 해맑던 우리 어제와 알 수 없는 내일조차 감싸 안아줘 Starlight 내가 먼저 다가갈게 이제 내가 널 비출게 아무 말 없이 안아줘 그대로 날 기다려줘 너로 날 채울 수 있게 지금 이대로 with me I will keep your night
Right, good evening. Let me just check that things are vaguely working correctly. I think they are, and in particular I think I'm actually capturing the correct output device. So maybe you can hear the faint bingling of the ambient music in the startup screen. Welcome back to my game of Shenzhen I, where we are in Shenzhen doing some electronics design. So last session we arrived and learned our way around the microcontroller that we're fighting with, and won a game of solitaire at the first attempt, which I thought was quite good. And now, yes, we have some more jobs to do. In particular, so what we currently have open to us, and I think I know which one I want to start with because it looks fun. We have a fairly tedious infrared sensor for detecting anything illegal that might generate heat, and presumably legal things that might generate heat, but maybe there are very few legal things you can do. The general prototyping board where we get to design a game, and I haven't made any serious attempts at that, and I don't know that I can actually do the entire process of design a game in this world live. Maybe I can. We have a decentralized autonomous corporation has determined that thorium mining operations in Xinjiang can be improved by producing this device, and the Three Kingdoms land, a local theme park of ancient Chinese society, want a machine for counting coins because the people who take the coins are not like very efficient at it or something. So yes, I think I yeah. Also, we haven't got very long today. Whereas we'll probably have a bit more time on Sunday. I think that the like traditional snake game might be achievable in this system, because like there you're only having to do local detection of what's going on around you, but the problem is, and you can then use the display as memory. So yes, that's a possibly useful thing. We can do custom LCDs, and you can read and write the state of the segments of the LCD. And given the paucity of other data storage, that may be the best kind of data storage for us. Tetris would probably be quite entertaining because you've got quite a lot of exploring around the piece to work out where it can move. But I think the coin machine is something that's achievable and sounds like it might be quite fun. Oh, and we got the undocumented instruction and condition code, so that we can emit do a MOV high to a simple I/O port, sleep MOV low to simple I/O port, sleep combination in a single instruction, which is obviously how all of the solutions to the early things using far fewer instructions than we thought were possible were achieved. And we have the at condition, which turns out to be run precisely once after power up.
So you can do an initialization
without needing to then have a jump back to, so that you can have an initialization step that's at the start of the program without having to carefully jump over it every time. You can still just fall out the bottom of the program and back in at the top and not run the initialization. So that's probably helpful too. I've forgotten my let's move my my IRC onto the other laptop trick again, haven't I? Well, I've charged it at least this time, so we'll do that at some point. That's what I should have been doing while we were playing music at the start. So the coin machine is a device where the customer inserts coins into the machine at the point at which they have paid the price, which is fixed. The machine rings a bell and gives them their change. So this, of course, is kind of interesting because we're dealing with money, and so it's quite important not to get it wrong. And let's just say that from glancing at the tests we've got so far suggest that their testing department is not up to scratch, because it certainly doesn't test all of the things that I would like to test. Like, what happens if I insert a coin while you're still giving me the change from the previous purchase? But I think we can do a pretty good job. I think we can't do a perfect job, because if someone just keeps on pouring in 12 yuan pieces, they will then, if we can't manage to make change fast enough, we may eventually overflow the accumulator in whatever we're using to keep track of how much money they've put in. But I feel that...
Was that the fidelity accumulators?
What?
You've got accumulators with fidelity.
No, this is the accumulator in a microprocessor, but they top out at 999, at a value of 999. Which, and interestingly, unlike most real processors, they have saturating arithmetic. So yes.
Well, I missed something else here. What's an MC4000X?
Right. So the. Thank you. So let's just Simon asks, what's the MC4000X? So the difference is that an MC4000 has 2 simple I/O and 2 X bus. An MC4000X has 4 X bus. And an MC6000 has 4 X bus and 2 simple I/O and an extra register and more program memory.
Yep. I remember the 4006.
The X we don't have a database for, a datasheet for. It's merely mentioned in passing in the MC4000 datasheet, saying we intend to release this sometime soon. No, that's the wrong password. There. Now everyone on the stream can work out my password from the sequence of key presses. Well, and a really irritating thing is that YouTube doesn't allow me the option to mute sections of the stream in retrospect. Oh, and I've discovered I should really make the thing that I do during Ocado visits be copyright music, because while when you
auto cuts it out for you.
it can do, yes. And more importantly, in general, YouTube will let you cut out a lump of your video in response to a copyright claim, but it must overlap the claimed music. So I couldn't use the copyright claim against the intro music to cut out a lump from the middle, because it said, no, that doesn't overlap the claim.
Could you not push pause or something? Does that work?
I don't think you can... maybe if I turn off auto stop on the stream, then I can pause streaming to it. Am I allowed to turn off auto stop on a stream while it's running? Edit. Customization. Is that where auto stop is? No. I don't know where auto stop comes. I mean, I don't usually use auto stop, so I could actually turn that off. Anyway, back from the YouTube streaming nagging. Okay, that laptop still hasn't started up. I really do need to start turning it on before I do anything else. So, what I think I want to do here, though, is in order to have some kind of financial consistency, we should have one processor whose job it is to receive the input pulses and keep in its accumulator how much money we think there is, and then it passes on to the other process, to another processor, or possibly 2 other processors, instructions about ringing the bell and giving change. But it never sleeps for more than one time unit, so it will always be able to pass to accept more coins. So that's the idea. So I think, so we're going to need an X-bus connection for the price. We're going to need 3 connections for the inputs, 3 simple connections for the inputs, and some kind of a connection for the outputs. So we need an MC6000. And we probably want, and a DX300, which will just connect straight to those. So, like, if we were really clever, we might be able to do this using a single MC6000. It's got just about enough pins. But I don't think I'm going to try to do that. I think what I'm going to do is attempt to have, is for my initial version, have one MC4000 whose job it is to make change, and one MC4000 whose job it is to ring the bell, because the bell has to ring for like 3 or 4 time units while we're making change, and like programming that area down there, that ring a bell and simultaneously make some change and stop ringing the bell partway through the change procedure is just going to be confusing. So I think this is the sensible approach. So we'll connect that up to there and that up to there. Right, and then we can connect X3 up to the X-bus input of that one, X2 up to the X-bus input of that one, P1 from there to there. Okay, that's going to be a minor nightmare, isn't it? Someone's insisted on putting a notch in the side of the circuit board at just the point where I want to run the track. Right, there we are. That's quite pretty, isn't it? Oh, yes, okay. And that X bus can go to there. So that looks like it ought to do a reasonable job. So then we...
Music reminded me of Pixel Jump Monsters. Isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't it?
So then we can move. We can do something that involves load the accumulator with the full price.
That game's name went from Pixel Jump Monsters to Pixel State Wibbly, eventually having Bingle Bingle Beep.
And then we do something like so looks like they can only insert one coin at a time based on this, so presumably it's one coin slot and it trips one of those three signals. So we know that the input is going to be 001 is going to be 1, 10 or 100. So, sorry, let me just read the rest of this. Blah, 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 blah. We can repeatedly reuse X1, and plus we're going to want to do that. I mean, admittedly, I don't have a use for DAT on here, so we could move it to DAT, but we can just keep rereading from the sensor. Right, I'm going to switch where I'm doing IRC now. Right, so now I can just turn my head rather than having to press Control-Alt-Up arrow 3 times. Right, so then it wants to do is X01 if it is... actually, let's not do that, because I think we should count up rather than counting down, because it's going to confuse me less. Oh, sorry, add 1. Add 5. And add 12. Right, so there's our initial thing for reading... I can just compare against X1 anyway. Our initial thing for detecting inserting of coins. No, I didn't mean step, I meant simulate. So that certainly seems to be increasing the accumulator in a reasonably plausible fashion. Let's check it a bit more slowly. So it receives 12, it increases the accumulator to 12. Another 12 increases it to 24. A 1 increases it to 25, to 26, to 27, 32. Yeah, that's all looking good. Right. So that's the coin accepting side of it written. So now it probably needs to do something, because at the moment, but like this is at least not losing the money. Like, all your money is stored in the accumulator. We just need to now write the code to get the money out of the accumulator again. So that wants to be something like is the accumulator greater than or equal to X1? So since we only have greater than and less than, or not greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to, I will use test less than and then minus for it is greater than or equal to. So it is not less than the price, and therefore let's send an arbitrary signal to X3, the bell ringing processor, and send the rest of the and subtract the price and send the rest of the accumulator to the change making processor, and mov ac x2 and wipe the accumulator. So thus essentially, I mean, if we're feeling really silly, we could carefully send x1 up to that processor. So law of conservation of money more or less applies. As we send signals out to other things, we decrease the value of the accumulator, though actually we do that by setting it back to 0. So now if we run this, everything goes fine until... Okay, oh yes, it doesn't sleep anymore, does it? Let's have it sleep. Slip 1. It goes fine until the point at which it tries to ring the bell and it sends a signal out of X3 and nothing's reading it. So actually we now have a slight problem, which is... no, that might actually work. So then this should just wait for a signal on X3. Okay, no, it's not X3 at this end, it's X0. And when it receives a signal, it should use the newly discovered undocumented instruction to ring the bell for 1, 2, 3, 4 time units and unring the bell for 0 time units.
Is that synchronous?
It's synchronous, yes, within that processor. So that processor will then that essentially does a mov 100 p1 slip 4 mov 0 p1 slip 0. I'm assuming slip 0 is safe.
If another signal comes in wanting another bell,
then I think we may actually end up with the entire system wedging hard. Obviously, so yes. So can someone achieve that? Yes, with the price of 16 they can. If they insert a third 12 yuan coin here, we want to start ringing the bell here. So ideally we would kind of queue up the bell ringings, which I suppose we might be able to achieve. We've got quite a few spare instructions in this processor. We could probably have it essentially have two things going on, one of which is accepting signals from upstream and adding them to the accumulator, and the other one of which is repeatedly ringing the bell. Which, like, maybe in the interests of correctness we should do. I was wondering actually if the game might do secret tests that control what the plot does later on, like whether your design does correctly work under the conditions of actually people pouring money in far too fast. So if we were to do that, it would be... Well, let's just build this one first. So that should now send that signal, and then the bell rings. But then it hangs on waiting on a write to X2. Oh, we actually need to read from X0, don't we? Yes, thank you. Mov X0 nil. Actually, no, that's not sensible. Oh, do you not have a nil register in this processor? Oh. I'm clearly a bit confused. I thought we had a nil register. Well, okay, let's move it to P0 then. Because TIS100 has a nil that you're really not going to allow me to flap a pin that's not connected to anything. Well, move it to AC then. I don't care. I'm not using it, but like I'm slightly offended by having to do that.
Null.
Oh, is it called null in this world? 2 L's? Okay, right. Yes, it's nil in X1 in TIS100.
I did remember reading about it. A 0 register. Let me just look it up.
I mean, yes, I have this vague memory of comments suggesting that this game is in the same universe as TIS-100, and that thus these processors may be derived from the TIS-100 ones, but clearly there's a lot of subtle differences. Right, let's just do that again. Now advance and check that. So that now rings the bell correctly, and then the whole thing hangs because that's now sleeping, sending the amount of change to make to the change making processor. Right. Thank you. Well, I can now see IRC on the other laptop, so all is well there. And I'm occasionally even glancing at it. Oh right, yes, you have a thing all the way up there where you didn't mention me. Have the master CPU then send 3, then ooh, cute. Maybe that works. So Diz asks, what's the purpose of SLX? Doesn't MOV wait for it anyway? Let's see what happens if we change it to a MOV, because I think the answer is no, it doesn't. Or rather, that's part of the 2 different versions of time that I think is not quite right here. But so then, if we attempt to run it, we wedge, because that part never sleeps. The fact that it's stuck in a read is willing to wait for milliseconds, but is not willing to wait for an entire large time unit. So essentially, yes, the MOV will wait for a small amount of time, but not a large amount of time. So we have to have the sleep there for yes, actually we want this to pause for a large amount of time waiting for an input. So well, let's as a small move have that MOV 4 to x3. I think we want 4 rather than 3. Right. So this one then looks very similar. Actually, yes, that can be quite cute if we do that, can't it? So it waits for an input. It then moves that to the accumulator, and then it's like if the accumulator is greater than or equal to 5, and let's have a label for C for change. Actually, this can probably be done slightly more cleverly. If it's greater than 1, then if it's greater than or equal to 1, oh, we also need to subtract 5, don't we? Otherwise, we're going to give infinite amounts of change. So we've got a slight problem that we've run out of programs, so this may have to be a bit cleverer. I'm not going to put in a MC6000 for what is obviously a trivial job.
Especially if you wouldn't have room to get that cable round if you do.
Possibly. Well, I can move it to the left a bit. Because that doesn't quite work. That will start all right. Let's just check if it starts all right. Advance. So that starts ringing the bell and correctly dispenses the first piece of change. and correctly dispenses the second piece of change, and then ends up wedged in the wrong place, as expected. So what I was wondering is if I make that a plus. No, but we need it to go. That doesn't work. So if I do that, then we end up in a mess because we'd have too many conditions in play, don't we? So one idea I had that was that that maybe this would turn out to be easier if we actually had the master processor send a signal down each of the XBus things on every step rather than only when it wanted to do something, and then that would allow us to always just do the entire loop here rather than having this awkward thing of needing to jump back to the top. But that's kind of awkward because actually it's every other step, and no, maybe let's not do that. Right, so let's see, is there a sensible way I can make this one instruction shorter? I mean, we can here is where I want the TIS-100 processors, where the condition codes are based on the current value of the accumulator, because then the sub automatically sets condition codes and happiness ensues. Here we have separate test and subtract instructions. So yes, we could have a. So yes, this side of it would work, wouldn't it? We could just go. Something like that. I mean, obviously, I won't put it there. I'll put it somewhere more sensible. That then sends on every cycle, which is inconvenient because that gen takes 2 cycles. But I suppose we could make that gen take problem is that we do need to only make change on alternate because the thing is the change actually needs to be high, low, and it's only after those 2 cycles that we can obviously that also should be an add, just like on general principles. Do not lose money. So then, so if that happens every cycle, then we can drop the SLX. So then every cycle we do that. And the nice thing is we can of course have multiple add x noughts in this. Add x naught means or rather is something we do after every slip. So then that would be thing add x naught. This is but that of course can be unconditional. And then drop that. No, we can't, because we still need that jump to get us back up to subtract 5s repeatedly. At that point, this all gets terribly complicated again. But we can... No, so then we have that. We can't... The sub 1 has to be somewhere. So yeah, that gains us 1 by throwing away the SLX, but doesn't otherwise help us, I don't think. That then ends up sleeping for too long. So I haven't, no. So that's what we had that I think is correct, except that it needs another jump C at the bottom here. But then... It's kind of awkward. Right, yes, I've just confirmed by carefully checking that the inputs are not carefully precisely on half of the always odd or always even clock cycles, well, time cycles, which would otherwise have been entertaining. And obviously that needs 2 accumulators. Sorry, I was just wondering if we could move one of the 2 coin outputs to a different processor, but since we want this to do... No, this clearly has to be a single processor, but do I really have to go for an MC6000 just to get enough program lines? That really disappoints me. I can't see a way to avoid it. We have to, like, we can't, I kind of want to arrange that we could reuse the same jump instruction, but that then requires that be set to plus. So if we change that to TGT AC0, then that could be plus TGT AC0, and then plus would mean it's still non-zero, and then we fall through to there, and then we unconditionally, and then, oh gods, then we jump back to C under particularly weird. So do we do that? No, that does. Oh, I think that doesn't work for. I think we want to say plus or minus, but not. Oh gods, yeah, that doesn't work, does it? I don't know why that doesn't work, so I'm going to test it. Okay, yes, that's why it doesn't work, because it falls through to there under those circumstances. So while everything else is fine, the problem is that I can't arrange that. I don't think I want that jump to be completely unconditional, do I? Because then I think we want that jump to be yeah, when ACK reaches 0, and then that goes wrong anyway, because it skips over that tuget. What? Oh no, I advanced time. It doesn't skip over that tuget because it does. Yes, that's working correctly. So, like, hello, give me an error. That worked. Yes, part not sleeping. So that worked up to the point where we needed that jump not to be executed because we ran out of condition codes for the jump. Essentially, because we'd already used minus for dispense 5 and plus for dispense 1. And then we needed that jump to execute plus or minus, which we could do if we had 2 copies of it, but the whole point was we couldn't have 2 copies of it. It's all awkward. Well, I can't see a way to do this, and no one else has told me one, to do this without going to the MC6 to a second MC6000, which just seems extravagant, but that's probably not quite appropriate, is it? Let's erase that bit of track there. So happily we can get round there. Oh, except that needs to be a different pin type. And then we want to take all of that code and paste it into that processor instead. And we can remove that one. And then that gives us enough space that we can write the boring version of the code. Right, so okay, yes, we've kind of forgotten to actually notice that we've dispensed far more money than has been put in.
Oh, you've given change forever.
Yes. We keep decrementing the accumulator. I mean, the change generating device does correctly record that the customer now owes us a lot of money. Like,
However,
you know, my double entry bookkeeping is going fine.
it's doing something about it basically.
It correctly says, like, the customer now owes us 3 yuan. Okay, I think maybe the customer at this point owes us 4 yuan. Oh, that's fine. We haven't. Yes, there we go. 4 yuan.
It's a good job it's a decimalised currency, really.
What?
Or is it all units?
The coins are 1, 5, and 12.
Okay.
So it's not very decimal. To make life fun for us, though actually, since we never care, those are just 3 constants written into the code here, it's not that entertaining. I mean, if they were 1, 10 and 100, of course it would make our lives much simpler. So I suppose, well, if nothing else, we can... Well, actually, this is simple. What? Oh, I didn't make any of this conditional. Right, yes, let's make those instructions conditional. Right, that'll do better. Right, that looks like it works more or less correctly. Though I am a little worried about what happens if people feed money in too fast. But I think what will happen if they feed money in too fast is that the entire system will wedge, and presumably there's something that obviously happens when you hit a part not sleeping or whatever it is.
Is the game putting in that money already, or is it? What?
So these are the we have a bunch of specifications for what the system should do under certain circumstances.
Right.
So here we are told with this set of 3 inputs, we should have this set of 3 outputs. And so I'm just advancing through the official set of test inputs and seeing if we generate the official outputs, which we now do.
If you pass all the test inputs, have you passed the puzzle? Or?
Yes.
Right.
Not just all the test inputs on this screen though.
Right.
There are a complete set of 80 tests. Of which we see 3 at approximately normal speed, and then it disappears off and does the rest. And I have no idea what happens if you manage to pass the first 3 and fail something else, because I've never achieved that. TIS100's approach was to have 3 fixed test cases and then a procedure for generating a random test case for the third one. Fourth one.
You can see it fails something else, but just say this doesn't work, and you've got to go, oh.
Or I mean, what would be nice would be if it then showed you test run N on the screen at the bottom.
Otherwise, you can work out a different configuration which does the same thing on the tests.
There's a website that does this sort of thing slightly more seriously, called HackerRank, which is intended to use for small programming exercises for real job interviews. And the challenges there have a number of test cases that you can see that are sufficient, they hope, for you to debug your honest attempt at the program. And then they have a bunch of hidden test cases that they don't actually show you, but they will check your program against to make sure you don't just hard-code the right answers for the visible test cases.
Yes. The thing about this is you've got so little space that it's almost impossible to hard-code the right answer.
That's true.
Like, even to the visible test cases. Right, okay. Well, I think this is more or less good enough. I'm still kind of offended about this one being slightly too long. But let's set it going. So we've definitely made a worse than average device. Yeah, I mean we're more or less modal on lines of code, but we are way above, well, somewhat above the mode of production cost and power usage. Power usage is essentially number of instructions actually executed, which is like, well, then surely we can reduce this. Jacob says, not finding any evidence for historical Chinese currency in 1:5:12 ratios.
I'm pretty sure those are not ratios that have been used in any currency.
No.
Because, I mean,
It's not far off old British, is it, where you have sort of the shillings and 240 whatnot in it.
Yeah, but you don't have 5 and 12 at the same level, because no reasonable person would have those coins.
it's almost as daft as the Harry Potter random number.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a thing in feet a metre, which is far.
Yes! And we can all do
Yeah. I mean, I quite liked Dizzyat's trick idea of sending the length of the bell ring. I mean, maybe that gives us enough that we could do the bell in the same processor, but then we've run out of... Because, like, we've got a few instructions here. So if we rang the bell in parallel, then maybe we could fit it in. Oh, maybe we can. Right, okay. What I'm going to do is I am going to copy that design and attempt to improve it. Because I wonder if we can do without this processor. I mean, it doesn't really matter if that's X1 or X0. Actually, we probably want to sleep on X0. Connect this instead to there. So the tricky thing though is we then have an accumulator which we're trying to use for two things. This processor doesn't have the swap instruction of the previous one, does it? So we don't actually have an easy way to swap the value of dat and ac, which is obviously something we'd like to be able to do. We have mov, jump, slut, add, sub, mul, not, and the weird digit extractions. Because otherwise we could have a thing that, like, decremented if we had two accumulators, then we could arrange this thing so that, well, actually, of course, we don't. When this is fired, it doesn't actually need both of these X-bus connections, does it? Because it'll be triggered. We know when we're asked to generate change, which might be zero change, that we also need to ring the bell. So our problem is the 4 cycles of bell and how we count to 4, which is the amount of time it takes to emit 2 coins. Is that a helpful fact? So that has, that might work, but I worry about the situation, where the bell has to ring for longer than the amount of time we're spending dispensing coins, like here. Because that means we end up having to spend a little while just looping for the bell to ring. So what if we did something like this? We do that, and we then do mov 1 dat. Then but then we need an X-bus connection to the bell, of course. So then, problem is we've got 2 jumps here, because I want to do something. I want at the end of each loop, if dat is okay, so let's have a jump to bell handling and have a bell handling routine down here, which does, if dat is 1, dat, otherwise, now we're getting otherwise unring the bell. So that then means that we can. Okay, that's not haspawn mov. The problem is now we've run out of instructions again. Now I want to jump C down here, and I haven't got room for it. Curses. So close. So the idea of this is that while we can't do arithmetic on dat, we can do, is it greater than 0? And since we only need it to run for 2 coin emission cycles, that would work. But that doesn't work partly because we've run out of instructions, and partly because we're missing one. We fail this test case because we don't actually spend enough time down here, I think. And we don't, and that gen, yeah. Okay, this one doesn't work. Justin asks, does this thing have revision control, i.e. can you get back to the working design? That's why I made a copy before I started engaging in these silly buggers. There is a copy of the working design. It doesn't actually have revision control, but we do now have two designs here. Called unhelpfully New Design 1 and New Design 1 brackets copy.
This is surely a totally sensible way of having copies of things.
Yes.
You know, I've been running a program called VGG5D.tool for the last several years.
Yes.
Because I went through one.
So my designs here are called New Design 1 and New Design 1 copy.
An example is called
Mouse test.
mouse test. Let's see, very few years.
And various names of mouse test and a year on it.
Well, you took recording in mouse test 1, 2, 3 was unhelpful, so I took a date on things.
Which is an improvement, to be fair. Right, yes. Yes, TIS 100 only allows you to have 3 designs for each challenge, but I don't think I've ever reached the point of having 3 different ideas for how to do something. Yeah, I'm beginning to think this is. I mean, was going to say unachievable, but we know it's not unachievable. We know we can do it cheaper. So, okay, that's a truly horrible idea, but that probably increases the price, doesn't it? I mean, because, yeah, I was wondering if we had separate 5 and 1 change generating processes and some horrible synchronization protocol, but the problem with that is we also need to ring the bell, and we've just spent 6 yuan on change generating processors. So like the idea was something like, and then the 5 generator obviously has to have the job of ringing. Maybe this will work. Right, scrap all of this. And try 1 MC 4000. Oh no, but then we haven't got anything we can use for.
You have to wipe out the tracks on the board one square at a time. You ought to be able to just push the switch at one end, which should retract like a tape measure.
So you're redoing this to make it more efficient in.
Ian suggests ring the bell with the input processor. I think that will work. I think it will be immoral, but I will do it anyway. Well, the problem is that involves the input processor stopping listening for input, which means that we'll miss inserted coins. Now, I think all of the tests don't care, because I think the tests have this naive assumption that the customer stops inserting coins when the bell rings. And I don't believe the customer will do that, but I think our test designer is inadequate because they haven't employed Verity to write their tests.
Or let a 5-year-old get at their.
Or let a 5-year-old get at the system. Yes. But yes, okay. So I think we can, but I'm willing to do that because we've done a version that doesn't have that bug. Actually, so let's hit undo. We do also have an undo button. Right. So remove that, disconnect that, and wire that up to the bell. Yeah, you get nasty messages and it won't let you simulate it. and hence remove that, and then instead turn that into a gen P1 for 1, or possibly 40 and then slip 1. That's probably better, isn't it? Right, and now we just need to remember how this code, what I want to do with this code. Remove that.
Turing complete. And I think I did some management about Turing travel, but no, I found the Turing complete drafting sheet. It wasn't what I was after.
And we could do something like that instead. So that probably passes the test at the... Why not 40 and no slip? We need the slip there in case they haven't put in enough money. Yes, SGT suggests that the MC4000 datasheet saying we are confident the MC4000 will find its way into your designs and into your heart indicates that the last level is to build a pacemaker. Well, at least we know how to do that fairly easily in an MC4000. Right. So, yes, I reckon that might work. But I don't like it because it ends up sleeping when the user could, in reality, be inserting coins. So, yes, it's technically a success, and yes, it gets us down to a more respectable parts cost. But like, yeah, I'm kind of a bit... Sorry, But as you say, at what price? Right. Let's just name them appropriately. I think Tilly has been somewhere in the vicinity of Carl, complaining about cheese. Just saying there's plenty of good and legitimate food that exists without cheese, and it's not like you're going to die from lack of it. Cheesy, yes. Well,
I mean, a different plausible Chinese attitude would be to treat McDonald's as essentially an arm of conquest, Western conquest strategy. You know, a sort of cheesy invaders.
Thank you, Simon. I mean, frankly, I would go, that's not cheese, really.
Well,
Yes, I will point out that there are other East Asian cuisines that have enthusiastically adopted cheese. Right, and what time is it? It's 11:30. We can probably design one more object. So, do we assemble sandwiches? Do we build a device to help with thorium mining? Or do we build an infrared sensor to assist with tracking of criminal activity?
Can you merge the first two?
No, thorium mining sandwich assembler.
You require more thorium.
Yes, obviously the thorium mining is irradiating Uyghur slaves in Xinjiang. Which, I mean, the sandwich assembler probably isn't going to kill people. Assemble cheese sandwiches just to spite her. Okay, we will assemble cheese sandwiches in order to spite Tilly. Personal sandwich maker. Keypad is an X-bus input connected to a keypad. Bread, meat, cheese and mustard are simple outputs connected to mechanisms that dispense those ingredients. Flag is a simple output connected to a motor that raises and lowers a small American flag when the sandwich is complete. It's a proper patriotic American sandwich maker. When a value is available from keypad, read it and dispense the sandwich using the information in the following table and the verification tab. 1. Sandwich time. Dispense the sandwich with meat, cheese and mustard. 2. Hold the cheese. Dispense the sandwich but don't add cheese. 3. Extra mustard. Dispense the sandwich with extra mustard.
Can you have no cheese and extra mustard?
Don't know. Let's look at the verification tab. I think no, because it only has 3 buttons, and you press one button and it immediately makes a sandwich.
Okay.
So the extra confusion is that here our customer, our end user, is going to sit there hammering on the button unhelpfully, I think. In that we get a bunch of button inputs. Oh no, sorry, that's the bread output. That's not an input. Right, that's fine. Our user still follows all the instructions. Why do people follow the instructions? Like, that's not how real users work. They're going to press the button 5 times, and then they want if they press the extra mustard button 5 times to get 5 times extra mustard.
Worse than that, they'll probably gets halfway through making the normal sandwich, and then they press the no cheese button and expect them to take the cheese off again.
When I was about 7 or 8, my grandparents' TV was able to push 8 push buttons, and you pushed one and it went in. Or you press a different button, that one popped out again. I wonder why would you use all the buttons in simultaneously?
Yes.
You want the 9th button to push them out again, and the answer is you've got to open the TV and press the ready release on the inside.
Yes. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outputs. So I mean the obvious thing is to go for, I mean, I'm going to be optimistic and try an MC4000. I don't really believe it'll work. And an I/O expander, and wire the I/O expander to 3 of them. And like connect that up to there and that. We've got an awful lot of circuit board for very little work here, which worries me a bit. Really not. Yes, but no. There, we don't need a bridge. Gods, do we have to?
those white tag input things. So you have to write in one of those white tags.
Yes. They 1, 3, 2, 1.
1, 3, 2, 1.
So that's what what buttons are being pressed.
They say very small and sideways as in high heels.
Yes. And there is going to be nowhere near enough space in this processor to write all my instructions, is there?
It's one of those moments where you're going to have a giant lookup table in ROM.
Oh yes, I can. As long as I only need to do the comparison once.
I got the root in the middle between the two must have adjacent to it. I wouldn't want that.
But the thing is, I can only read from it once, unlike a DX100 or whatever it's called, DX.
This is
300.
The school of thought that also came up with Gam's Gone Cream.
Yes. Really sideways,
Yes. So, just wondering how much. So, a ROM costs the same as as the difference between MC4000 and MC6000. Which is intriguing, actually, because we could. Yeah, I wonder if we can actually do quite nicely by reading in parameters from so like we always want bread, meat, bread, and the only question is what other things do we want along bread, meat, bread, flag. So those are like MOV, I don't know which order they end up in, 1x1, 1 MOV 10x1, yeah, that's already using quite a lot of our instructions. I mean, I'm here pretending that we've connected the last one of those up to flag, because then we can do other things conditionalized by what's in ROM. Okay, so let's try. So that's a bit. So the thing is that even just signaling those takes us. Or maybe. Yeah, that's messy as well. Okay, let's try my idea, because I like my idea, even though it may be silly. Which one of these is the ROM then? That one? Yes. So I think we're going to need a big processor and a ROM. I wonder if we can just connect the keypad directly to the address input of the ROM. Probably not. Let's reorganize things a bit. So I think I want to have those things that are always done the same connected to the I/O multiplexer. So that's bread, and we always emit bread, we always emit let's move the I/O multiplexer up a square. We always emit bread, we always emit meat, and we always wave a flag. And the slightly awkward thing is that all of our bridges are vertical. You're going to then thus find that the hardest thing here is actually getting the signals to the right place. Well, let's not worry about the wiring for now. let's worry about the programming. So we'll hook the ROM up there, say. Oops. And run that over there, right. So then my idea is that we do something like wait for a signal, move it to the accumulator, multiply it by, say, 4, and then move that to the address input of the ROM. Now emit bread sleep 1, emit meat sleep 1, may need something cleverer than this. Generate a potential mustard pulse. So we're going to have mustard on, I think, P0. Yeah. Oops. Like that. And we read from the ROM to tell us how much mustard we emit. We then generate a cheese pulse similarly on P1. And so then we have the wiring problem that we can't actually get that to the cheese pin. We'll worry about that in a bit. And then oh gods, we need to do the bread and the flag, don't we? We don't have enough space for this. Bread sleep 1, flag and sleep 1. Curses. And then the idea, actually, since that only reads 2, let's change that mul 4 to mul 2. And then the idea is that we say, I think that starts at 0. So we have that cell contain, we want 1, if we press button 1, we want 1 mustard and 1 cheese. If it's that one, we want 2 mustard and 1 cheese. Sorry, if it's 2, we want 1 mustard and 0 cheese, and then 2 mustard and 1 cheese. So I think this does not quite work. Partly because the wiring's wrong and it's just popped up the flag at the wrong moment. So let's just switch those. Around a bit. Dizzy says BH21 generate bread and meat with slup. Do you mean Gen? And I think I can't because they're hooked up to an I/O expander. Though maybe our answer here is to replace the I/O expander with something cleverer. So that correctly dispenses a bread and a meat. and then everything's gone horribly pear-shaped because it's now dispensing mustard when it's meant to be dispensing cheese. That's a read-only memory.
Or you've got hard coding some publication.
So that essentially the arrangement is you press the button and that picks a position in the memory to start reading components for your sandwich from. Yeah, so the problem is we can't use gen for anything that's connected to an I/O expander, I believe. I mean, let's test it. Let's see what happens if we go gen x1 100 10. Sorry. Yes, well, we can't even do that because, well, I suppose technically that might work. It must be a simple I/O pin, yes. So that's our problem. Though maybe the answer... Oh, no, that doesn't really work. I mean, we could have a little loop where we run around in the ROM reading out... So, what was going wrong anyway? So that then correctly emits meat, but then gets confused over mustard and cheese, which is because I've got probably got my P0 and P1 the wrong way around there. I mean, even ignoring the fact that we haven't actually wired up the cheese dispenser yet. I mean, now it dispenses the mustard at the right moment and doesn't dispense any cheese, yes. I mean, we can probably fix this by getting that track out of the way and running it down the middle of the ROM. Moving this left a bit. And then running that track like that. And then we can drop in another bridge there. There we go. Now it will at least generate cheese. So it correctly reaches the point where it raises the flag. See, it's passed quite a lot of the tests now. Unfortunately, it never lowers the flag until you next press a button. And it's getting its cheese and its mustard confused. So the 3 state, 1, 2, 3, now needs cheese and mustard swapping over because I got confused about which one was which. And similarly, the 2 state needs its cheese and mustard swapping over again. So we're close. Like, it generates the correct sandwiches. The only problem is that it keeps the little American flag raised too long. Essentially because we need 2 more instructions. Yes, nothing catches fire. So because the problem is that we need instructions to lower the flag and well, that's it really. Well, we need instructions to time the correct amount of time for the flag to be up and then lower the flag. So the question is there some elegant way to do that? So, I mean, ac is unused, essentially. We could turn it into dat instead. Diziat says he has it. Right. Is your having it a reasonably simple thing that I could implement here? Only one sequence in the ROM. So we have the ROM sequence would does that work? So the ROM sequence says something like I'm beginning to get the idea. I have an idea. So let's see, how much timing information do we need? If we were to have the ROM sequence essentially specify a list of values for, say, 2 I/O expanders and then a sleep for each step. The longest program is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, because we need 3. So that would mean, yeah, we need 3. No, that's going to be too long. Oh, so Seb says bread, meat, cheese, mustard, flag, 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 flag. So the idea being that we don't actually have the lengths of any pulses, we just specify the state after each clock pulse. So that means that the longest one is, as Claire says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 units long. Then buttons skip parts somehow. Well, we could do, can we do digit extraction usefully? Not very much, because we really want... So if we had, like, a thing... I was wondering if we could do something that involved directly hooking the ROM up to the bread meat flag generator somehow. I mean, it feels like we're putting far too much effort into the bread meat flag bit. Or rather, I should be careful here. Bread meat, yes, Claire, yes, your instruction is indeed missing a bread. I keep doing that. I keep designing my sandwiches without the bread on the other side. So it's an awful lot of steps. But as we do have 2 ROM connections, and it's interesting to observe that we have 2 so what happens if you hook up a ROM output to the input of that? Like, does everything just seize up? Or does it just never get updated? I mean, that obviously seizes up because it can't send anything anymore. I don't think that helps. I'm just going to experiment by going into the prototyping area. And dropping in, because I want to just see how this works. If we have, here of course we get much bigger ROMs available. Don't think we're allowed ROMs that big in the real thing. If we have one of those and one of those and one of those, and we hook up data to there, and then an X bus output from that to that, and then we go mov naught x naught. That goes that way. Did that send an update? If we make that, let's wire up a couple of LEDs to it. Right, no, it doesn't. So the ROM annoyingly doesn't behave like a real ROM in that you can't just stuff things in on the address inputs and expect the data outputs to be useful, because it's waiting for something to read and the IO expander is waiting for something to write, and neither of them, and they're both like asynchronous, and so nothing ends up happening, and so you have to stick a little processor in there to do read write read write read write. So while entertaining, yes, that trick doesn't work. So yes, Diz suggests maybe just add in another processor for this job, essentially. Yes, we don't have the big ROM available. We do have some RAM if we want it, which would feel completely mad. So yes, that trick's not going to work. So yes, okay. Have a little extra processor, second microprocessor for your extra instructions. So annoyingly, we have 5 outputs, so we still need the IO expander. But I was hoping to use the ROM. Oh well. Right, so let's wipe out all the circuit, or at least much of the circuitry. So let's see, what does this want to actually do? If we have this one, an IO expander lets you have 2 different controllers drive the same ports. Yes, you're right, it does, doesn't it? So we could just, yes, okay, I think I see where you're going with this. Now the question is, can I find enough space? I mean, that isn't quite enough space. That's fine, we can clear that out the way. Okay, that's not enough space either. Let's move this processor leftwards a bit. Now that can be much simpler, Harris, if you just swap those X-bus pins around. Oops, wrong button. That allows me to move that processor another space to the left again. Right there. That's a much better place to put that CPU. Yes, and then, as you say, second processor reads from the first when it wants it to do its stuff. So we probably end up with something like that connecting them, and then that. And I think so. Actually, if we just so let's imagine we had just this being the incredibly crude version. Can you remember what the numbers are for each of our... So, meat... So, this one wants to go bread... This one wants to be bread. Is bread 1 or 100? Bread's 100, isn't it? So we could have this one do something like that. Oh, it has to. So that processor then handles signalling, handles the second bread and the flag. But then this one no longer has the ROM to do the hard work. So it starts by emitting everything, emitting the bread and the meat, and then it does if they haven't asked us to hold the cheese, emit cheese, which is say P1. If they always emit 1 unit of mustard. If they have asked for extra mustard, generate another unit of mustard. Signal the second processor to do something. I moved it to ACK because I need to test. At the moment, I'm testing it twice. I do teak ACK 0, teak ACK 3. Now, I suspect we can get that down to 1, but I want to try to do it without the cleverness. Can player X 0 with 2, and then you think I can do it all with plus and minus, do you? Okay. Well, can I just try this and check that it works? But let's first read from the correct pin. We need to read from X1, not from X0, right? And then mov those to X1 as is correct, right? Okay, it has hung. Blocked on writing to x1. Why? Oh yes, because that should be x0, right. Okay, we, slightly to my surprise, end up emitting far too much meat because we need to stop emitting meat. Right. Now we're emitting far too much cheese. Why are we emitting so much cheese? So we do stop emitting cheese. Oh, I think that's just me being an idiot again. Right. I think we need to make sure that we... because P1 is cheese and P0 is mustard. Right. That'll work better. Right, there we go. Right, so that appears to be behaving correctly now. So let's see if Dizzyat's suggestion of compare x0 with 2 and then we can do it with plus and minus. So if we do that, plus means we read a 3, which is extra mustard, and minus means we read a 1. I think you're right. I think we can... Well, let's first of all do it the simple way. Do it in the accumulator. Then we emit... So P1 is cheese. So we emit... oh, hang on, no. Because we usually want to emit cheese. It's only if it's... We end up with emit cheese if plus and emit cheese if minus. And then emit one mustard unconditionally and emit another mustard if plus. And then that TCP x0 can then be turned into a TCP of TCP x2 can be turned into TCP x12. Did that save? I think that saved us an instruction, didn't it? So well done. Yes. Let's test if it works. That looked good. Yes, and yes. And I don't worry nearly so much about what happens if people press the buttons too often in this one. Wow, we're actually less than the modal power usage and less than the modal number of lines of code. So people have made cheaper ones. Right, there was a thing, yes, that I didn't show last time. I don't think we looked at all of the responses. So yes, Joe has sent a message saying, please give me another chance. I think possibly we got an email that was meant to go to his boss rather than to us. But there was... Was it the pulse generator? No. Oh yes, the light up signs, which were a Joe idea, which got a message. No, not the light ups. The light up signs. There was one of these. Oh, was it? There was another one of Joe's ones. Cool Dad, that was it. Where, with every project we take, there are factors we can control and factors we cannot control. We could not control the fact that Cool Dad was arrested and jailed for possession of amphetamines as he attempted to enter Japan, thus cancelling the world tour. However, there was something under our control, and that was the terms of the deal. We could have negotiated a better contract that would have allowed us some recourse if something like this happened, instead of us leaving us on the hook with 100,000 useless colour-changing light-up vapes for us to dump at basement prices. So yes, this was Joe's first disaster, where he had found someone who wanted to buy 100,000 light-up vapes, but didn't arrange that they were definitely going to pay for them. So, we won't actually do any more projects tonight because it's 17 minutes past midnight, but let's have a look at what our what the new things are. We have a deal to create a highly portable infrared targeting device that automatically switches emitter modes based on range. At long range, the aiming laser is on. At mid-range, the aiming laser switches to half power and turns on a 20-degree flood emitter. At close range, it switches completely to a 60-degree flood. I've placed a copy of the table at your desk. It's in the PDF. I've noted it. As a mounted add-on for any type of carbine weapon, it has the potential to do very well across government and law enforcement agencies. Carl, I'm going to note right out of this one, if none of you mind. So he's not going to build the carbine target illuminator. Can you keep a secret? Haunted doll project. I was doing some research on the internet. It seems that if a doll is a haunted doll, it brings way more interest. Haunted dolls that get caught on live stream are almost guaranteed to go viral. So what if we took some dolls from a factory from around here and put some parts in them to haunt them, and then distributed them along with normal dolls to toy stores? Oh my god, haunted doll! We just have to keep it a secret so it doesn't leak that we're manufacturing them here. Yes, hello, Joe. Joe, are you serious right now? So in TIS 100 you could complete it without actually completing all of the projects. Now we just need a haunted random number generator. Just remember that good specifications result in good designs. Poor specifications result in poor designs. So we now have concept spec available. Which drops me into a text editor. Thank you. Sorry, a text editor which you can't see because it's a separate program. Right, well, let's not muck around with that right now. One function returns the name of the specification, one returns the description, one returns the shape of the board. Yes, this is actually the level editor, only the level editor is just a Lua file in... Well, actually in gedit. So, right, thank you for that. Can I have my game back, please? Right, meanwhile, well, let's quickly look at the haunted doll spec. So there's our haunted random number generator, probably. Speaker is a simple output. When a value of 1 is generated, play the sinister giggle. When a value of 2 is randomly generated, play the blood-curdling cry. Right. So yes, our probably magic hexagram, I Ching hexagram generator sits in that corner, and obviously this is a job for dumping a ROM in there. So yes, somewhere in the datasheet is the EK1 Oracle engine, which is probably what this is, but we will see. Anyway, that is a job for next time. We have successfully made sandwiches and we have successfully made change. Today we have, yes, our design for the change generating machine. Did they change the price at any point in when this was tested? I presume they did. Yes. Always rather high prices, I notice. And we generated sandwiches, though the sandwich, though really their specifications don't test anything like enough of the what happens if someone mashes all the buttons simultaneously. Like that appeared to just test generating all of the possible sandwiches in different sequences. Oh well. Anyway. Right, so we'll leave that for tonight. We have successfully done some things and we have some more things to do in the future. Dizzy suggests that mashed buttons just give you a mashed sandwich, which is probably correct, yes. So, I think it is time to say good night, and we will see you on Sunday, I expect. Good night.